tucked away in a business district just outside of the casino lights of Las Vegas,
sits this hidden gem. It is here you'll find the city's oldest buildings, left all but forgotten by those who choose to pass by. Hey sightseers, Sightseeing Sally here. You see, Meandering Marty has accompanied me. Today we're in Las Vegas, checking out one of the city's most obscure, unknown little hidden gems, chock full of some surprising history. The place? Kyle Ranch Historic Park, located in the city of North Las Vegas. Established by Conrad Kyle in 1875, this was one of only 2 major ranches in Las Vegas Valley throughout the 19th century. Interestingly enough, the Kyle tenure was marked by violence, with neighboring rancher Archibald Stewart being killed in a gunfight here in 1884. And then, 16 years later, Edwin and William Kyle were found deceased on the ranch. Initially believed to be one of those situations where one took the life of the other and then self-inflicted their own life. Authorities later determined that an unknown party took the lives of both men. To this day, nobody knows who did it, and the mystery of what happened to those 2 Kyle men remains unsolved. But that's not the only fascinating history associated with this location. There's plenty more to come, as you'll soon find out. First, I just want to point out how beautifully kept this location is. You can see they are watering the grass today, and the grass is looking really nice and green, almost like you could go out and play golf on it, if you were so inclined. I'm not a golfer, so that doesn't exactly trip my trigger, but I know some of you out there are probably admiring that green grass and wish your own grass looked as nice. The other thing I'm noticing about the landscape is they've got, of course, your native, or maybe they're not native. Somebody chime in and let me know. Are these plants native to the desert's ecosystem out here? But they do have some beautiful plants that can be seen along the walkways here. And the other thing of interest to point out is the fact that they've got this old Spanish trail marker marking the exact spot where the trail ran through here during the years of 1829 to 1848, which was all prior to the Kyle Ranch being purchased, the land being purchased and established. One thing you might not know about this historic park, which by the way happens to be on the National Register of Historic Places, is that at one time there was a building here known as the White House. Built by John S. Park in 1911, the Park Mansion, or the White House as it became known, was the main dwelling structure on the ranch for generations after Conrad Kyle and William Clark owned this property. In its prime, it was a main source of entertainment for this area, hosting tea parties and elegant dinners. All that remains of it, unfortunately, is its foundation, which can be found here under the grass. Evidently, it burnt down in 1992. If we look over here, we can see where the Kyle family has been laid to rest. The adobe structure that you see over here is believed to have been built by Conrad Kyle. It was used by the Kyles as basically a general store and a structure in which to store various goods that they sold to weary travelers along the old Spanish Trail. Or at least That's what the information says on the board. I want to point out an interesting sign here. It says that this very structure is the oldest building in Las Vegas, and it's believed to have been built in 1856. Again, as stated earlier by Conrad Kyle, what I find most interesting about Las Vegas's oldest building is that it actually had a basement built into it. How often do you see that out in the desert? With the exception of a few mining structures that we've seen in various areas like Death Valley, Utah, where some of those structures had, underground areas. For the most part, at least now in modern times, you don't find homes out in the desert with a basement. It's just not very common, and I find that rather interesting and unique about Las Vegas's oldest building. Now, normally, Las Vegas's oldest building is kept locked and you can't access it. But today, we've been granted special permission to go inside and check it out. You can see it's a rather simple structure with the adobe brick. And then of course, they would have had the wood framed up for the ceiling, perhaps, or maybe not. Maybe that was added in as a way to stabilize the structure to keep it from collapsing. But you can see old wooden floor here. And at one time it did have a commode, as evidenced by the toilet and the hole leading out of the building.
And the drain for the sink there.
Oh, is there a drain?
Probably the other small hole to where the water line came up for the sink. Or the sink was here at one time. There might have been a shower there.
Yeah, it looks more
like a shower, and then the sink was here because you can see where the water lines, the drain is there, the water lines are there. There's a switch right here from, at one point when electricity came around, they actually put a knob and tube. So the trusses and all that might be original, but the bracing on here is more modern, so that's not as old as the building, but it's possible that these trusses and stringers are.
Yeah, over here you can see, again, evidence, I think, of the old electrical that was once part of this building, and now you can see more modern electrical that's part of the building now. Wow, that was really cool. Now I can say I've been inside Las Vegas's oldest building. How many people can also say that?
I can.
Well, that makes two of us. Besides Las Vegas's oldest building that you'll find in this park, you can also find another old relic sitting on a picnic table here.
Really?
Although I really can't say too much because I am technically the older one of the two, so.
Exactly.
I guess I shouldn't be throwing any shade around. Moving on, I just want to go back over by the cemetery portion here where the Kyles have been buried. Looking at the sign, you'll notice that we've got several Kyles, Conrad, Edwin, William, and an unnamed infant, with Edwin and William being the two whose ending still remains a mystery. And then Mary J. Latimer. Latimer was a family friend who regularly visited the ranch. When she passed, well, prior to her passing, she requested that she be buried here, and they did honor her wishes. Prior to this area being established as a ranch, there was actually, not too far from here, an old Mormon fort. According to this, that old Mormon fort was the first permanent structure in the valley, and it was located about 1.5 miles south of this very park. Apparently, a group of missionaries were sent down here from Salt Lake City, and they were going to convert some of the Native Americans that were living here. In fact, on Christmas Day, 1855, it was noted in historical records that this very site, the location of this historic park, was established as what they called an Indian farm. I get how that sounds, but upon further reading, it appears it was more or less a collaboration between the missionaries, the Mormon missionaries, and the Native Americans that were here, where they were growing crops such as wheat, corn. They even established possibly some buildings over here. We can see some pictures of what the indigenous peoples looked like that were in this area. Some of the other crops that were grown over here would have included hay, squash, grapes, vegetables, and a variety of fruit trees. Of course, you wouldn't have been able to do that without water or having a primary water source, which, if we look over here, we can see one of Nevada's oldest artesian springs and wetland areas. Now being preserved as part of this park, this water that ran through here once served as an important source for the Native Americans who occupied the area, along with the Mormons, the missionaries who came here, later the Kyles. And believe it or not, they even sold water from this spring to miners so that they had a source of water out in the desert. If we look here, we can see a timeline of some of the more important events associated with this location. Of course, going way back, you can see circa 32,000 BC, the formation of Lake Bonneville, which I'm not sure if they're talking specifically here. Then you can see in 700 AD, the Native Americans that settled the area. You've got 1776 AD when the Spanish explorers encountered them. And then we move up a little bit closer in time to 1855 when the old Mormon fort was built just somewhere about a mile and a half. And then in 1858, the missionaries ended up leaving. Now, something I haven't talked about yet is the fact that prior to the Kyles establishing a ranch here, there was actually someone else who started a ranch. It was known as the Las Vegas Ranch, and that was established 1865. That was then sold to Conrad Kyle in 1884, and that's when he established his ranch. Then 1900 is about when they lost the two family members with that mysterious set of circumstances. From there, the railroad buys the land. It was then sold in 1911 to John Park, who built what was called the White House, and so on. We'll get into some of that a little bit more later because I want to show you over here where they have reestablished an orchard. There was, of course, as I mentioned a little while ago, that they were growing fruit trees here. Well, as part of the restoration efforts on this historic park, you can see the sign, Kyle Ranch Historic Park. They have replanted the orchard. The sign that's in front of me talks a little bit about some of that agricultural history where the Mormon settlers took advantage of that spring water to use it to irrigate. They planted crops, including, as I said, corn and wheat. Vineyards of grapes from Europe were imported. Tropical plants with, I guess, fruit that could rival some of the best of Southern California was also said to have been planted here, and pear trees, figs, and apricots. Nowadays, they're growing various things such as vegetables for a community garden, and then of course you've got the fruit trees, the orchard that is in play right here. The location of Las Vegas's oldest buildings, I have to say, is an amazing hidden gem here in the city of North Las Vegas, something I had no idea existed until recently. Quite a miniature oasis within the realm of a cement city. Look at that, they even have an old style hand pump and of course your buckboard wagon. Now some of you may have noticed I used the plural form of building and referred to it as Las Vegas's oldest buildings or some of Vegas's oldest buildings. That's because besides the oldest building sitting over there, they have what is known as the dollhouse sitting over here. The dollhouse being a small cottage that was not originally on the property during the time of the Kyle family ranch. Rather, it was constructed by Edwin Losey during what was known as the glamour era of the Boulderado Dude Ranch in 1939. Built on a foundation of railroad ties, they say that this small house is an example of board and batten construction. But what really makes this structure so unique and interesting is the history, the story behind it, one that I think you'll find ultimately fascinating. Because, believe it or not, this house was used by couples traveling to the area looking for a quickie divorce. That's right, the Kyle Ranch Historic Park not only houses the oldest building in Las Vegas, but it also has the history of once being a place where couples, Hollywood magnates, people who could come and get divorced on the fly. Relatively speaking, there were some limitations which required the couples to come and establish residency here in Nevada for a minimum of 6 weeks. Which is why in 1939, Edwin Losey leased the Taylor Ranch and began an extensive remodel and building project to create the Boulderado Dude Ranch. Looking at our handy dandy timeline, you can see that it would have been within this time period that this location, this property, was used as a location to get a quickie divorce. For a pretty penny, wealthy couples could come out, stay in a little cabin, a quaint little cabin like that, establish residency here in Nevada, and 6 weeks later, be divorced. Apparently, these minimal residency requirements allowed privileged guests, such as George Montgomery and Mickey Rooney, to quietly divorce in luxury. Don't get any ideas there, Marty. Unfortunately, or unfortunately, depending on where you stand on that spectrum, the success of the Dude Ranch here, the glamour era, was short-lived. Casinos began to provide the same opportunity to divorce seekers, but with more glitz and privacy. Along with that, divorce laws across the United States began to ease up, making it a lot easier for couples to get divorced within their own state. It was probably also more financially feasible than coming out, spending money at the Boulderado Dude Ranch in order to get your quickie divorce by staying in the dollhouse or any other number of cottages that were here. Thus, the end of quickie divorces at the Boulderado Dude Ranch. If you're wondering what happened after that, according to the sign, the Losey family then bought the 330-acre ranch and continued to operate it. However, they started to sell off the property piece by piece, with the last sale occurring in 1961 with only 25 acres left. Something else that you might find interesting about the history of the historic Kyle Ranch is that in 1901, the land was purchased by Utah, Nevada, and California Railroad, which was owned by U.S. Senator and mining magnate William Clark. Clark also acquired the Las Vegas Ranch in 1902, and then, using the right-of-ways between the two ranches, he created an interstate route with both ranches providing water, produce, and livestock for the railroad and its employees. And interestingly enough, if we look over to our east, today. You can see where an industrial park has sprung up. Apparently, there may even still be an active railroad somewhere over in that area, but this industrial complex or industrial park serves as a reminder or as evidence of that land development by Clark. Now apparently, while I've been busy yammering on about history about the park, Marty says that there's a whole nother section that we need to go check out. And do you want to lead the way?
Over there.
Over there? I guess it's somewhere over there. We have no idea what there's going to be to see. This is our first time here, and I don't know about you, but I've just been fascinated by the history here. It's just filled with mysteries, intrigue. You know, you've got the unsolved mystery of the two Kyle brothers, and then of course the more tawdry history related to the Quickie divorces. Regardless, if you're not into history, this is a really nice little oasis in northern Las Vegas. Look at this. You've got geese and ducks just hanging out there by the side of the pond. A great walking area that goes up and appears to go around. And a really nice observation deck overlooking the pond that has been created or established here. You can see more of the industrial complexes that are in the park over there. Something I never would have guessed existed in the city of North Las Vegas. If you look up over there, you can see the mountains. If you look like this, you can barely tell you're in the city. It's only when you look off to my right that you can see that we are indeed in a section of North Las Vegas. I believe you've got a homeless encampment right there along the fence line. But over here, you've got birds singing, the sound of the water coming up from the spring. And well, it's definitely a nice reprieve from the hustle and bustle of downtown. I'm no goose expert, but it does look like we might have a mother goose sitting there guarding her eggs. She looks like she's giving me the side eye. If you know anything about Canadian geese, you don't want to mess with them, especially with their young. They can get pretty nasty. We have lots of those back in Wisconsin, and well, I might have encountered an angry goose a time or two.
But never an angry Canadian. They're always happy.
And there you have it, sightseers. One of the city of North Las Vegas's hidden gems. The location of the city's oldest building in a park tucked away behind a chain-linked fence. Basically hidden in the middle of an industrial park. Who would have thought? But given we're in Las Vegas, I shouldn't be surprised by any of that. Before I bid you all adieu, I want to just give a quick shout out of thanks to the city employees of North Las Vegas for giving us access to a couple of areas that we ordinarily wouldn't have been able to get. Until next time.